Stained glass. This is your life.
This is my life.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you enjoy it?
This is my life.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you enjoy it?
I do. I think of that often, that question, do I enjoy it? Do I like what I do? And I find the answer has always been yes, and I feel very lucky and privileged to have such a unique path in life. You know, there's a lot of people who do it as a craft, as a hobby, but as far as stained glass businesses and studios, it really is a rarity. And it's not something that most people even think about, or it never crossed their mind, unless, of course, they're looking for that in some way. You know, typically when people think of stained glass or they come across stained glass, it's a window, it's in somebody's home, and it's definitely highly functional in that regard. There's a feel that comes with stained glass when it's within your space like that. The same feel that you get if you're in a church or a synagogue. It sets a mood for a space, and it really transcends that functionality. Most people get their exposure early on for the stained glass world, or art glass in that application, truly from churches growing up. I think that's shifting. You know, as people shift, the younger generations are shifting spiritually, they're experiencing it in a different way and more of a artisan craft kind of way. Artistically, stained glass has evolved greatly over the past 40 years, from just windows to things that are much different, to things that are just form. Traditionally, we're doing a lot of restoration, the company, for churches, universities. Yale University, we do quite a bit for them, right. Churches all over the state. So over the years, the company has worked on many restorations, many of which are Tiffany, and even windows that are older that predate Tiffany. Matlin Armstrong windows up in Norfolk, they have Tiffany and Matlin Armstrong. Those are much older. You know, and we kind of approach those the same way as we do any window that comes in to be restored. We take them all very seriously. We document way more than we need to, right. Just in case, because as you restore a window, you're doing detective work and you're finding out what the previous artisan did, the previous craftsman did, and trying to replicate that exactly the way it was to keep the historical integrity. Currently, we're getting quite a lot of calls for new commission pieces for clients' homes, for their entryways. They want to, people are spending a lot of time at home from the pandemic happening, and they're updating. And that was a surprise I wasn't expecting.
It's another aspect of what you do is teaching. And that's huge. That's how I got into it. My husband and I took a class and then I got a job. And that was my first exposure into stained glass, was taking a class because it drew me. And so I think that's another um, economically positive avenue for you, is to share this with people who aren't going to invest in a studio and make it their life's work. Um, so talk a little bit about your class um, load and what you have to offer for people.
So teaching has become a massive part of our daily life here at the studio. Years ago, studios did not want to teach. They held on to their secrets. They didn't want to share knowledge. It was really something that was archaic in a way of thinking. So when studios started teaching, it was about the 70s, 60s, 70s. Stained glass became like a hobby that people really want to get into. Right. And that was kind of a big peak of it as a hobby, and then it died down. Now teaching, we teach almost every night of the week. We teach workshops on the weekends. It's super accessible. We try to make it as accessible as we can to anybody, all different walks of life. And it's one of my favorite things to do in the studio. And some days I have to remind myself, I do still need to create and make, because I could be very content just teaching every day. The creativity that happens in classes, people who don't believe they're artists, oh, I can't draw. By the end of the first night, they're drawing their own pattern. It's very accessible, and it's really getting people out of their own headspace. Very often we refer to it as cheap therapy. And that's what it is. You're mindfully meditating as you're focusing on doing this craft. It sparks something for them. And we have students who've been coming for 8 years straight. They are brilliant artists in their own right. It's not just stained glass that they're doing. They're doing really artistic, higher level pieces, in my opinion. And we mix those students in with brand new students so they can be exposed and see what everybody's doing.
So it becomes a community.
Truly, it's a community.
Yeah.
And I really think of it as the studio as more of an experimental space. If somebody has an idea, a student comes in with an idea, we're going to figure out how to do it. They leave with something amazing that they have created with their own hands, with their own mind, with their own energy. That's incredible, and they're proud of that. And they leave with an appreciation for what really goes into it, because really the general public has no idea how stained glass windows are built.
Or how dangerous it can be. I have a scar and I cannot feel this side of my finger because I had an accident with an X-Acto blade and a leaded pane. Okay, so then tools, my favorite part. What is your favorite tool?
What is my favorite tool? Um, I have to say, this might be a cop out, but the glass saw. Um, when glass saws first came out, prior to the 70s, there were not grinders. There were not saws. There were basic hand tools, which stained glass artisans used for years. That's all you use. So when grinders came out, it made the process easier, a little more accessible. And then saws came out in, I want to say, the late 90s. And then some purists, and I'm a purist in a lot of ways when it comes to lead glass work, leaded cane work, said, oh, that's cheating. No, it's not. If Tiffany and Maitland Armstrong had saws, they would have used those saws all day long.
Right. It goes through it like butter.
Truly, you can cut any shape, any design, cleanly, simply. It's gratifying, and it really pushes it to a different level. So yes, when you look at old stained glass windows, Tiffany, there are some intricately deep cuts in the glass. When we're restoring a window, I try to keep it as historically accurate as possible, right down to grozing, it's called, or chewing the glass away to get those curves. Yeah. But you know what? If they had the saws, they would have used them.
Right. Well, and I have always said, and I think that this is what kind of started me in this journey, is the tools make it a joy instead of a job. It takes the work out of it. If you have the right tools, it's just bing, 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 and you're done. What do you see as the future of your craft?
So the future of this craft, I think, is faceted. There's a lot of options for it, and it has evolved so much in the 26 years I've been with the studio. It shifts year to year, and very often in surprising ways to me. There's not a lot of professional studios across the country. There's a few massive studios, big top dog studios, we call them, where they have 50 people on staff. They're doing monumental work. And monumental work is fulfilling, and it's exciting, but it's all consuming. And separate from being a craftsman, as an artist, it's very draining to me. 15 years ago, I thought bigger the better for the studio. We had to grow, we had to be huge to be successful. And I had a massive studio, and I had a very large staff, and I was miserable. Right. So I scaled back everything. And I really have the studio in the place now, and over the past 10 years, it has evolved to something that is fulfilling, it's manageable, it allows us to be successful without being so big that I cannot create. And I think many craftsmen are going towards that. I now have a home studio on my property, which is what was always a dream for me, to walk across my lawn with a cup of coffee and go to work. So I really like middle of the road work. I like doing large restorations for churches. I like doing artistic pieces for clients. I like mixing it up and doing something different every day. That's what keeps me interested, right?
And that's what keeps you an artist.
Absolutely. So, my kind of advice for that is really doing that. It's listening to yourself. So it's so hard for people to listen to themselves. You know, I was always an artist since I was a child, painting, drawing, sculpting, whatever I could do.
Right.
And it really led me to this path.
Right.
And I just hope younger people can find that sooner than later. And if it's later, it's later. That's okay. That's
Right.
the joy of experiencing this life around us
Right.
and living it.
Well, and I think that that's something also that young people are looking for is a way to, the way that I, say it is to express their DNA, is to be themselves and not have to go down a cookie cutter route. Because we're not mass produced.
I mean, I always say to people, particularly to my son and other people around me, you can do whatever you want. You can't do everything you want. And that was always a phrase I stuck with my whole life. And more recently, I thought, why not do everything you want?
Right.
You know, why not?